Hello everyone, my name is Tino, and this is the second video I'm doing on Organico. Organico is my startup with the goal to help farmers scale their production labor-free, utilizing automation. On this episode, I'll be talking a little bit about my thoughts on the future of farming and agriculture. And more specifically, the future of farming and agriculture, not including grain crops like rice, wheat, and soy. Maybe I'll cover those on another video. But more specifically, the types of crops that you most associate with plants and veggies, so things like tomatoes, carrots, leafy greens, and the like. Let's begin by talking about the future of traditional agriculture. Now, traditional agriculture is where you have a big dirt field far away, and usually where land is cheap, and usually where it's nice and sunny. And you have all manner of highly engineered fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, to give the plants an optimal environment in which they grow. And in the future, I think there are a couple of advances that will be really interesting for traditional farming. And most specifically, for the field farming of things like fruits and veggies, I think you'll see the beginning of full automation. So right now, the way labor is done in the field is you have a combination of machines and a combination of people. And these are usually people who, for example, in a field of lettuce, will cut the heads of lettuces and then put them onto a big machine. And that machine will then go along with them and transport everything and have a manner of systems in which the whole field can be harvested in one go with a lot of workers. But I think in the future, you'll have a lot of automation in this field, and it will require a lot of machine vision. It will require a lot of robotic grippers and a lot of advanced robotics to really nail full automation for the field. So I think the field is going to be really exciting because, or the future of field farming will be exciting because you'll have full automation in the future, and you'll have profitability in the field that is much higher than it is today due to the labor requirements for the field. So I think that's exciting. I think field farming will not go away for a couple of decades for these crop types. But the second type of farming that I want to talk about and its future compared to the future of traditional farming is local farming. And now, what merits a local farming future? Well, for instance, in local farming, you can use techniques like hydroponics and aeroponics. And with techniques like this, you don't require dirt, and you can also grow in an indoor environment. In an indoor environment, you can completely control for the environment that the plant is getting. And what this results in is a dramatic increase in the yield and the output for what you can get that biology to produce. So for example, you can have a lettuce that is grown in half the amount of time that it takes in the field. And this is really because you get that level of control for what the plant biology is receiving. Something you can't control that precisely in the field, and it's very hard to control in the field. So for example, you can control for things like the amount of hours that a plant gets with artificial lighting, with LEDs. You can turn on the LEDs for 24 hours, you can turn on the LEDs for 12 hours, and you can really have a fine adjustment of the regimen that the plants will be given. For another example is you can control the specific nutrients. You can control for the nitrate content. You can control for the salt content. You can control for the potassium content. You can really finely control what the plants are being fed at every moment. And when you have the aggregation of many of these control points, you really have a phenomenal increase in yield, and that's something that really merits the future for local farming. But now, local farming, of course, at this current point, is less automated than field farming. You really have a lot, despite it being thought of as more technologically advanced, in reality, you have a lot less machinery, a lot less automation, a lot less automation of labor than you do compared to the field. And I think at the moment that, coupled with poor indoor farming techniques, is what makes indoor farming seem so much less attractive. But in the future, you can begin to have a lot more automation. And what does that mean for indoor farming in the future? Well, this means that in the coming decade, actually, I think even in a period before you have full automation in the field, you'll start to see full automation specifically for things like leafy greens and even maybe perhaps for fruiting plants, because automation in a controlled environment, in an indoor environment, is a lot easier to create and is a lot easier to be robust and to work. So I think very soon in the future you'll see a point to which full automation is achieved indoors, despite it still not being achieved in the field. And I think that will be really exciting, because I think that will be the first time where indoor farming really has a chance to compete, profit for profit with the field. Because when you add up things like transport and things like distribution, something that is heavily required for field farming, for traditional farming, and you compare that to a model where food is farmed locally and at these much higher yields and with full automation, I think you'll really have an exciting period where indoor farming is so much more competitive. But now, what happens when field farming reaches full automation parity with indoor farming? And now this is something that will happen in maybe 2 decades. And I think this will also be really interesting, because you'll really have indoor farming really push forward in its advanced techniques for increasing yield. So, for example, AeroFarms, the world's biggest vertical farm, claims that they have a yield multiple over the field of 6. And this is a figure that they gave about 2 years ago. And you can sort of imagine with the amount of data that they're collecting and with the amount of environment control that they're achieving indoors, you can really imagine that, this technology is still in its infancy. And, it's been 2 years. I imagine they're up to 7 yield multiples over the field. So I think over the next decades, you'll really see that keep increasing until it's at the peak of what indoor farming, into what is possible with indoor farming. So I think that'll be really interesting. And I think that might mean when you pit field farming against indoor farming in the future, you might have a sort of an ebb and flow where right now the field farming wins, but then you reach full automation in indoor, then the indoor farm wins. But then you have the parity of automation coming from the field. And then you have, on the indoor side, the yield multiples getting that much higher to where the use of artificial lighting is really canceled out a tremendous amount. And on top of everything, you'll have transportation and distribution still being heavily discounted in an indoor model. So that's really exciting. And there you have the 2 biggest, I think, future methods for farming. But there's another method that I think doesn't get talked about very much. And I think, whether it will be seen in the future or not, I don't think anybody will know. I don't think anybody knows. But you have this phenomenon of cultured meat. And cultured meat, is where you take an animal cell, and you culture it in a lab environment, in a controlled environment, and you can grow full animal organs in a controlled environment without the presence of the actual animal. Now, this type of farming, I think, will begin to be used with plants. Now, this is something that is not being very well explored now, but I think could be well explored in the future. And really the big question is, can these cultured agriculture methods advance to a point to where they are as efficient as in methods of indoor farming or methods of field farming? And I don't know. I don't know very much about this field, but it's certainly a field to keep your eyes on. And cultured biology, that is fascinating. And I think maybe just maybe, that'll be another contestant in the future of farming. So that's it. Those are my takes on the future of agriculture and the future of farming. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching.